We are glad to have with us Mrs. Shuang Ning and Mr. Chorng Shin, who will be sharing on leading two network learning communities, our professional development journey. Over to you.
Yeah, thank you. Yep, so I will be the first presenter. So let me just share my screen first. Let's do a check. Yep, I hope you can see my screen. Okay, yep. Okay, yep. So, just a short introduction. I'm Chorng Shin. I have Shuang Ning with me. So together we run two NLCs. So for our foreign participants, it's called the Network Learning Community. Usually we collaborate between different schools to run something which we thought we could do to benefit the students. So I will just move on, and if there are any questions, just feel free to stop me along the way. Okay, so before that, normally for acknowledgement, right, we will tend to talk about it towards the end of our presentation, but we will just run through everything. So I thought it's not very nice. So I thought I will just want to take this opportunity to thank Diamond High, where Shuang Ning is from, and myself from Hwa Chong, for giving us the autonomy to run a lot of such initiatives. And of course, the different staff from AST and CPDD. The AST stands for the Academy of Singapore Teachers, and CPDD is a curriculum development one of the units in MOE. So the staff mentioned over here, like Dr. Sharin, Kian Hui, Stephanie, they are the master teachers and the lead specialists, which oversee some of the NLC which we are running. And then of course our collaborators from the two NLC and all the teachers and participants in our activities, past and present. Okay, so I will just want to give a little introduction to the NLCs. These are the two NLCs we are going to talk about. I will talk about the H2 NLC which I'm running, and then after that I will pass on to Shuang Ning, and then that will be followed by a closing where we will take questions. Okay, so those of us who are Singapore teachers, yeah, we probably know of this resource known as OPEL 2.0. So for professional development of teachers, I think as mentioned quite frequently for the past 2 to 3 years for lifelong learning, as well as the introduction of OPEL 2.0, there are a lot of resources we have for professional development. Okay, so if you look at what we have in the folder, there are basically 4 different areas. So you can attend workshops or learning programs. For example, let's say I teach A-level chemistry. So for example, if they are going to introduce some new concepts, then NIE will probably run a content upgrading program for teachers, etc. Okay, and some of these learnings can be blended learning. So for example, you do a little bit of online and then you go on site to do some collaborative learning. Okay, or it could be a grounds up initiative like a network learning community where the teachers come together and we decide that okay, that is something we can do together as a fraternity, and then we get some support from CPDD and AST, and then after that we will map out what we want to do. Yeah, and that's what we are going to share today. And of course, instructional mentoring, where within the school there could be a mentor guiding a teacher who is new to the school or who is new to teaching of a certain program. Okay, so I attended some of the earlier sessions in the other rooms, so I will not go too much into details. So NLC, basically the difference between NLC and professional learning circles, the difference is that one is largely in schools and the other one is a collaboration between schools. Yeah. I don't think there is an advantage or disadvantage of either one. It just depends on the things we are working on, and we will just see what is necessary to decide which model we want to go towards. But basically for NLC, for the case of JC chemistry, sometimes it's easier to collaborate between schools because of the candidature size. So there are certain limitations. I think later on Shuang Ning will elaborate on H3. Okay, yeah. So I think the earlier presenters, not in this virtual room but another virtual room, talks about how we collectively gain knowledge or this, so I will not go into too much details. Okay, but what I can share is that for NLCs, what we can work on together as a team, right? Sometimes each of us have a different working style, and we come from different backgrounds. So when we come together, the effect is multiplied by many times. So for example, 10 people come together, it's not just times 10, but it could be it's a multiplier effect. Yeah, so that's a very good way moving forward. And because it comes from the teachers, from the ground, so a lot of the initiative, the teachers involved, they tend to be a little bit more proactive. Yeah, because there is no KPI to meet for the running of the NLC. Yeah, so if you feel that okay, this year I'm not very I'm not able to run it that well, then you can always say pass on to somebody else, or you can just stop for a year. Yeah, so there is no pressure in running it well. At least that is from my understanding with AST and CPDD. Okay, yeah. So I think the more important thing is to learn from one another, learn with one another, and then learn on behalf of others. So sometimes the things I pick up from the NLC, I may not need it. I can transfer that particular knowledge to someone else in my own school. And then most importantly, we tend to be a little bit more reflective, because when we see the processes by other schools, sometimes we can take back and think about whether we can improve on our own processes in our own schools. Okay, yeah. This is something which I abstracted from the booklet on NLC, so I will not go into details. So right now I will just go straight into the journey, how it started. Okay, so I started teaching in 2010 as a beginning teacher. As everyone knows, beginning teacher tends to be very enthusiastic, and chemistry tends to be my a subject which is very close to my heart. So I'm always want to find ways to enrich students, etc. So since 2013, I was given quite a little bit of opportunities to share some of the things which we did with fellow educators. Yep. And it's always in my mind whether this thing can go further, whether it can take a step further to benefit more of the fraternity. So in 2017, so what happened was CPDD, because I have friends who are in CPDD as curriculum planning officers, so they were asking me whether I'm interested to drive an NLC on H3 because of the running of the new H3 curriculum. Yeah, so we met over here I still remember, in Metropolis Mac Cafe. So I had a coffee session with them. So with the discussion, I thought it's a pretty good idea. So following that, I wrote in Shuang Ning, who is going to talk about the H3 NLC. So she will elaborate on the bulk of the process which goes on in the NLC. And then for me, I will talk about the other NLC which I'm running, which is the H2 NLC. Okay, so this started from an email from me to AST, so regarding a possible workshop on crafting database questions. Okay, so I'm just going to jump straight into what exactly is database questions for our international community, because and of course some of the teachers may not be aware of what goes on in A levels. Okay, so database questions are basically questions where you are given a set of data. So the data need not be stuff which the students have learned before in their curriculum. It could come from like science magazines such as Scientific American, or it could be a newspaper article. That's more for O levels. So this is an example of a O level database question where the students were taught bleach was being mentioned, and a little bit of the reaction and some of the ideas behind bleach was mentioned. And do take note that this is O-level chemistry, okay? And then they were given some of the structures as well, and then after that given other details where the students will have to answer questions which follows. Okay, yeah. Then this is something like a A-level kind of database questions. So it's actually on olive oil. So the students were given some data, and then these are the data they are given, and then later on they need to answer some questions following that. It can be very intensive, and teachers are usually quite stressful in coming up with a good question like that, because the way you need to pitch the questions and where you find all this data, sometimes it can be a little bit challenging for teachers. Yeah. And of course, this is one of the questions which came out in 2016. It's actually on an organometallic reaction known as the Monsanto process. Okay, so then you might be asking, okay, so since this is the database question, then how can we value adds, or how do you manage to come in? Okay, so since I was young, meaning a teenager or even as an undergraduate student, I have always been wanting to or I love to craft questions based on the different contexts I get. Yeah, so and along the way, there are certain processes I have in mind which I thought is good to share with people. And then of course, such database questions are not very common in the past for H2 chemistry. But of course, if you are talking about stretching the gifted students, that is not a problem. But for the bulk of the students in Singapore, that is something which, of course, it's a little bit out of hand. So what I thought was, okay, since the revised H2 curriculum have this component, and at the same time, from the AST chemistry chapter, there is also a workshop for O-level teachers. So I was thinking there is a little bit of gap here because there isn't such workshop for A-level teachers. So what I did was I just dropped an email to AST, and then I got a reply. Okay, so basically in the email I was just saying that, okay, there are some stuff which I thought is interesting, and then I can share with the fraternity. So do you think there is something which we can do to conduct some of these workshops? And then eventually Dr. Sharin from AST have a word with me in May 2017, together with Kian Hui. Kian Hui was the lead teacher back in NYJC, and then currently he's the master teacher in AST. Okay, so he wrote Kian Hui in, and at the same time, essentially this is how the NLC begins, because Kian Hui wrote his former colleagues, I wrote in my SH Ming Li in, and then together we were thinking, okay, so how about we run a workshop in the same year, and then we try to see what we can do to benefit the community. Yeah, so that's what happened. So we ran the first workshop in 2017, end of 2017, and then we did a bit of a review on what we did. It's a one-day workshop, so it goes from like 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. Yeah, so we did a review, and then we were discussing what we should do following 2018. Yeah, and then of course we also want to review some of the aims for this particular database, crafting database question work interest group or NLC. Is it simply just to share the best practices for A-level, or can it be used as a professional development for A-level teachers, or could the processes which we share with the teachers, when the teachers bring back to A-levels, they can use it and benefit their own school teachers? So these are some of the questions we have in mind. And of course, within the core team members, we learn from one another and share some of the best practices we have. Yeah, so that's essentially how it happened. So we did a bit of discussion, and then 2018 we ran the workshop a little bit differently. So if you recall what I mentioned earlier on, 2017 is a full day workshop. So in 2017 we ran 2 half days. Yeah, so the 2 half days were on 20th and 23rd March in 2018. That's before the pandemic. Yeah, and then we did it slightly differently, and I won't go into details what we did, but I mean, if you're interested to find out, you can always drop me an email. Yep. And then after that, we decided that maybe a full day workshop kind of like works better. So in 2019, we decided to go back to a full day workshop. Yeah. Then because that due to the limited number of teachers teaching A levels, I mean we all know that primary school, we have a lot of students. So yeah, we have a lot more primary school teachers, and then of course secondary school teachers, the numbers shrink a little bit, and then when it comes to JC, the number of students shrink even more lah. So comparatively speaking, when you run the same workshop for three consecutive years, right, probably teachers who wants to attend already attended, or even the newer teachers who have benefited from their seniors sharing lah. So in 2019, we came together and discussed what shall we do moving forward. Should we keep the workshop as it is, or should we morph it into a different form? Yeah, so true enough, in 2020, before the pandemic hits, we have a final meeting, and then we decide that, okay, so we're going to morph it into another format. We call it developing learning tasks for deeper learning lah. So deeper learning is an idea I got from attending one of the assessment conference in 2019, where we were told one of the ideas on performance-based assessment was being shared by this Professor Christopher Garrist. Yeah, so I thought, okay, so the reason why performance-based assessment was because from the ideas of developing or crafting database questions for the same resources, we can craft different kinds of performance-based assessment based on that. Yeah, it need not just be a database question. It could be a project. So for example, it could be things such as I have a limestone, and then we get the students to find out the percentage composition of, let's say, calcium carbonate in the limestone. It could be morphed into a project involving about a group of students, say over a period of a month. So they need to plan out how they do certain things lah. So there are a lot of possibilities we can do with this. So we thought that, okay, if we morph it into this form, it's more generic. It's not kept within the A-level community, so we can spread it out to maybe even O-level teachers as well lah. So that was what happened in 2020, and then this thing continues. It went a little bit slow. It's a little bit slow now. 2021, 2022, because of the pandemic. Yeah, but we are still running the workshops. We ran a workshop last year, and this year we're running another one. Yeah, so that was how we morphed the H2 NLC from a database workshop solely to one which is a little bit more generic. Okay, yeah. So right now I will pass on to Shuang Ning. She will be talking about her experience running the H3 NLC as a 2IC.
Hello, I'll be talking a bit about the H3 Higher 3 Chemistry Network Learning Community. So we do have members across quite a lot of JCs. Most of the JCs who offer this subject, we do have a representative in our group. So the biggest push for why the NLC exists in the first place is because there was a new syllabus that was rolled out, that was to be rolled out to be taught and assessed in 2019. So with the new syllabus, there comes a lot of demands on teachers. So first, there will be new LOs, their learning outcomes that were not in the previous syllabus. And CPTE and NIE has helped us bridge this gap by arranging for content upgrading, extra workshops for teachers. But even with the content upgrading, teachers teaching this course will still need to prepare the teaching materials to engage students. And there's a new question type that we will need to be able to teach students to grapple with, as well as set questions for. This is also compounded by the fact that usually each H3 team in the school is really small, because we pretty much have a very, very small candidature. So in a regular, some schools may have 5 students a year. The larger candidature schools may be about 70. So you don't have many teachers working on that. So the new question type is called a stimulus-based question, and this is an example of what it looks like. It's from a 2020 paper. So on the left, you will see what we call the abstract. It is taken from a scientific paper. So teachers who are setting questions for students or training the students to work on these questions will have to assess scientific literature, make sense of it, and try to work out which papers are suitable and how do we adapt the paper for the students. So the questions that we will have to set, for example, we will see on the right, is for students to have an opportunity to analyze and integrate data that's in the question from the text, and also to give them enough room to evaluate real-world applications. So for example, in this case, a vanadium flow cell. So they have to talk about, okay, what are the advantages or disadvantages of it based on the data that they are given. So this presents quite a big challenge to us. So those are the two main drivers. One, the new question type, how do teachers set, and how do we even start getting students used to reading scientific literature. Then next will be the material preparation because of all the new content that will be in the syllabus from 2019 onwards. So those are our initial aims of the NLC. But as we work together, we realized that there is more room for even more collaboration. So there were activities that were added along the way over the years as we realized we could learn a lot from each other. So for example, we exchanged ideas of how do we engage students with the L's, how do we offer different range of learning experiences, for example, practicals, hands-on activities, learning journeys, or even alternative ways of teaching and learning. So the Viva, the oral assessment, is something that was slowly introduced to a few schools. What the students had to do was they would be given a problem set and they had some time to look at it, and afterwards they would have to talk through their thought process with assessor, the teacher, and we will give them guidance as they work through the problem. So it's kind of like AFL. Then we also realized that we could actually collaborate and make our jobs more efficient on routine tasks. So for example, we work together on setting a common prelim examination across schools, and we also discussed the latest A-level paper to think about how do we teach students and how do we teach them how to interpret the question, approach the question, how to tackle it, and what are the key takeaways they can take from it. So with a lot of activities that we've carried out, we've used YouTube as a repository. So even if there are new teachers joining us who weren't there for the previous year, they could actually assess the materials that we've recorded the previous year. And some of the materials then allow us to change the nature of engagement. So they could maybe watch the first part, the students could watch the first part on their own, and we could gather together just for the discussions. And another thing, another activity that was quite big for PD was having a combined prelim exam. So at the bottom, you could see the time scale of how that evolved. We started just trialing in 2018. There was just only between 2 schools in the old syllabus. And when the new syllabus came in with the new demands of the new question types, 4 schools came together to set one common paper with the proof of concept that this is workable. Then more schools came in, and we have been continuing that for the last few years. And based on anecdotal feedback, we can learn from each other's processes. So not every school has the same setting, vetting, and assessment timeframe and process. And in collaborating with other colleagues from other schools, we have more time to just discuss and adjust our questions so that the questions are a bit more robust and we can learn from each other's different perspectives. We also gather together as a group to vet the paper together. So if it was done in one school, we will only have maybe 2 or 3 teachers setting the whole paper. Whereas if we did it as a team, there could be up to maybe 10 setters, which helps improve the paper. Yeah. So next, I'll be talking about the different stages of the NLC development. In the very initial phase in 2017, it was very informal, just based on, okay, if you happen to know someone and you're organizing something, you get them to come along, like, hey, you want to join us for this activity? So that would be Viva that's usually held in HCI. So I think Chorng Shin got someone else to come in. Then got another school students to also join in for the learning journey to NUS labs. Then as we started collaborating more, and also 2018 was the year before the new syllabus was rolled out. So one very big focus was developing materials for the new syllabus. But we still continue to rope more teachers into the other activities as well. In 2019 was actually quite a big push to expand collaborative efforts. We got students in for Viva as well, not just teachers as assessors, but students. So in the whole venue, it will be very mixed. There will be students from 3 schools and teachers from like 5 schools cross-assessing each other. So that was quite exciting. And we also started having more targeted teacher PD to target the new syllabus, talking about, okay, how do we assess scientific literature and learning from each other, how do we teach certain LOs or certain methods of pedagogy. So for example, how do we use modeling instruction to teach a certain concept? And we continue with learning journeys and as well as literature appreciation for students as well. just because the students would then need to be able to tackle the SPQs. 2021, we had great plans for 2020, but because of COVID, many things has to change. So workshops, even teacher training, some could still continue, but via Zoom. The NLCs still continue to meet, but I think we haven't met in person for a few years. We have been meeting via Zoom most of the time, but when we meet, different schools will now come in to talk about the different learning experiences that they have curated for the students. And the scope of the combined prelim has expanded. For this year, we are mostly keeping to very similar activities. Maybe what is newer is we are working in a more targeted fashion to sort of discuss the previous A-level paper and work together to provide teaching solutions as a whole team. And we're also thinking about how can we develop resources for blended learning. Yeah. So as the NLC developed, it was very informal at the start and the scope increased. And the direction kind of changed along the way in an unexpected fashion, but it was going according to what the members' needs. So we collect some feedback from members at the end of the year, and most of the feedback is quite positive, talking about them appreciating how they can appreciate perspectives from teachers from different schools, as well as students' experience from different schools as well. Yeah, and that would be the last slide. I think, yeah. So hopefully by working together, we will be able to develop a better learning experience for the students and also provide PD for the teachers who are teaching the course. Yes. So if you have any questions, please let us know.
I think earlier on we forgot to mention that you can actually scan the QR code here if you wish to have a copy of the PDF slides. If you didn't manage to follow what we said earlier on, everything is in except the photos.
I think your experience conducting analysis through face-to-face and then also online as well. So do you want to share with us any differences in terms of learning NLC in face-to-face and online, whether any advantage or disadvantage in both methods?
Sorry, I didn't catch your question. You mean the running of the NLC online and offline and meet face to face? What's the difference? Is it?
Yeah. Any strengths and weaknesses of both methods? Yeah.
I guess the difference would be more of if you want a face to face meeting, then the teachers will have to travel to a common place, and sometimes it might be a little bit difficult given the timetable constraint of different schools. And sometimes teachers will just rush down from their school days, and then usually the meeting will have to start like say after 4 p.m. At least for junior college, that is usually the timing which suits most teachers. So if we are to meet say once or twice a term, then it will have to be 4:30 p.m. to like 5:30 p.m. You can't keep the meeting long as well. And we will only meet when it's really necessary before the pandemic as well. So we don't like meet even sometimes we only meet like 3 times a year. I think that would be good enough. Yeah. During pandemic or post-pandemic, because of Zoom or even Google Meet or Microsoft Teams, right? I think meeting online is a little bit more efficient. yeah, so the timing could be earlier, and the teachers can choose to meet from their home if they choose to, say, go home. So I thought that would be better lah. I don't think the work is compromised. I think it's more of like how we arrange the nature of the work. So and whether everybody agrees that that is the thing we should do lah. Yeah.
Thank you. Any other audience have any more questions? If anyone has the question to ask, then maybe we end the presentation today. Okay. Thank you.